The WWE is a world of contracts, handshakes, and strict hierarchy. But sometimes a single man decides the rules no longer apply. For years, Dean Ambrose was the unpredictable heartbeat of the company. A ticking time bomb, but the story isn't about why he left. It's about the staggering, unseen confrontation with Vince McMahon over the final, desperate offer contract designed to buy his silence and secure his loyalty forever. Jon Moxley walked away from millions. He walked away from history. This is the secret, dramatic truth behind the final nitrogen monoxide. The moment Dean Ambrose looked the chairman in the eye and refused the deal that could have changed everything. To understand the gravity of Dean Ambrose's departure, you must first comprehend the character he played and the man who played him. Dean Ambrose was not a polished WWE superstar. He was chaos personified, a walking, talking anomaly in a carefully manicured system. He was the Shield's grit, the one performer who consistently seemed to be operating on a different frequency than the tightly controlled environment of Stamford. Jon Moxley, the man behind the persona, was an old-school professional, fiercely loyal to the craft, but deeply allergic to what he perceived as the company's creative sterility. This inherent conflict, the love for wrestling versus the distaste for the WWE machine, was the foundation of the impending explosion. For years, the company tried to fit the square peg into the circular hole. They saw the undeniable star power, the unique connection he had with the audience, but they struggled to contain his volatility. The backstage whispers were constant. Ambrose was difficult. Ambrose was unhappy. Ambrose was always on the brink of revolt. Yet, he stayed. He was loyal to his brothers, Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins, and he understood the scale of the platform. But the frustration was a slow-acting poison. The creative decisions, the comedy segments, the sudden turns, the forced reliance on props began to chip away at the man's soul. Sources suggest that during his final year, the lack of creative control wasn't just annoying, it became personally insulting. Vince McMahon, the ultimate architect, knew exactly what he had in Ambrose, a generational talent who couldn't be replaced. But he also knew Ambrose was uncontrollable. Vince, accustomed to molding performers into his vision, found in Moxley a rare challenge, a talent who refused to be broken. The dynamic was less employer-employee and more a psychological chess match between two iron wills. Vince tried to smother the fire with money and opportunity. Moxley responded by pushing the creative limits further, often resulting in segments that felt genuinely uncomfortable for both the performers and the audience. The final 6 months of his contract became a desperate, public spectacle of a relationship in freefall. The company attempted character shifts, the bizarre heel turn, the sudden medical announcement, all designed to reignite the passion and justify the massive investment. But it was too late. The damage was done. The relationship was irreparable. The stage was set not for a typical contract negotiation, but for a final showdown in the chairman's office. It was the culmination of years of creative clashes, and the stakes were about to become astronomically high. This wasn't about a raise, it was about the soul of the man known as Dean Ambrose. As the final weeks of Dean Ambrose's contract ticked down, the backstage atmosphere became a barricaded wall of silence and anxiety surrounding the inevitable meeting. Everyone knew the situation was unprecedented. Superstars of his caliber simply do not walk away in their prime, especially not to join rival promotions, unless the schism is profound. The locker room was divided. Some quietly supported his pursuit of creative freedom, others viewed his stance as professional suicide. The crucial backstage details revolve around the efforts made to prevent the departure. Triple H, known for his ability to connect with talent on a more personal, creative level than Vince, reportedly made multiple attempts to broker a peace treaty. He offered creative concessions, promises of main event slots, and the chance to steer his own character away from the more outlandish demands of the writing team. These efforts, though earnest, were met with polite but firm rejection. Moxley was not looking for a compromise, he was looking for a divorce. He had already checked out emotionally and creatively. The final contract meeting was scheduled not in a sterile conference room, but in Vince McMahon's private office, a place legendary for making or breaking careers. It was a calculated move. Vince wanted the environment to be intimidating, personal, and imposing. Sources suggest only 3 people were present: Vince McMahon, a legal representative, and Jon Moxley himself. There were no cameras, no writers, no PR teams. This was the pure, unfiltered exchange of power versus passion. The negotiations did not involve typical back-and-forth haggling. Vince, according to confidential reports, laid out the final offer immediately. It wasn't just a renewal, it was a deal designed to be impossible to refuse. The reported numbers were staggering: a multi-million-dollar per year contract, guaranteed creative control over his character's major direction, a reduced schedule to ease the physical toll, and a clear path to a future WrestleMania main event against a legendary opponent. It was an offer that would solidify his financial future and cement his status as a permanent, protected WWE star. This offer was not about retention, it was about control and psychological dominance. Vince wanted to prove that no one walks away from his empire when he's holding the keys to the kingdom. He put a physical, bound contract across the table, expecting the defiant performer to finally yield to the inevitable allure of power and wealth. But Jon Moxley, sitting across from the most powerful man in wrestling, was about to deliver a silent, devastating blow that would send shockwaves through the entire industry. He had already made up his mind long ago. The sheer scale of the final offer is a critical piece of the secret history. While exact figures remain tightly guarded, insider reports suggest the contract was conservatively valued at over 7 figures annually for a minimum of 4 years, plus guaranteed royalties and merchandising percentages that would have easily pushed the total compensation into the realm of generational wealth. This was not the standard superstar contract. This was the do not leave contract, reserved for performers deemed irreplaceable, performers like Brock Lesnar or Roman Reigns. Vince McMahon's strategy was clear: appeal directly to the primal need for security and status. By offering this unprecedented package, he believed he was neutralizing Moxley's creative complaints. You want power, here is financial power. You want respect, here is the highest possible salary. He saw the contract as the ultimate trump card, a material manifestation of the dream every wrestler chases. But as Moxley sat there, looking at the thick stack of papers, the physical weight of years of financial freedom, his response was reportedly a chilling study in detachment. He didn't erupt in anger. He didn't beg for more money. He didn't even argue the terms. He simply looked at the document, then back at Vince McMahon, who sat waiting, confident in the irresistible gravity of his offer. Moxley's internal turmoil, though hidden behind the Dean Ambrose facade, was reaching its breaking point. He wasn't rejecting the money, he was rejecting the chains that came with it. He saw the creative promises as temporary concessions, things that would be eroded and reversed the moment the ink dried. He realized that accepting the contract meant accepting a predetermined artistic destiny, forever shackled to the vision of one man. For a performer whose entire professional identity was built on unpredictability and raw emotion, this was a fate worse than poverty. According to sources, Moxley did not touch the pen, he did not ask questions. He leaned back and delivered a quiet monologue that stunned Vince McMahon into silence. He spoke not as Dean Ambrose, the unstable character, but as Jon Moxley, the disillusioned artist. He talked about the joy of wrestling, the visceral connection with the audience, and the profound lack of fulfillment he felt performing material he despised. He made it clear the contract was valuable, but his sanity and his legacy were priceless. The staggering numbers meant nothing when the art was compromised. He was sacrificing financial freedom for artistic liberation. The climax of the confrontation was a moment of profound, cold silence. After Moxley finished his statement, Vince McMahon, reportedly taken aback by the sheer force of the performer's conviction, attempted one last psychological maneuver. He didn't raise his voice, he went colder. He questioned Moxley's intelligence, his maturity, and his ability to replicate the WWE level of success anywhere else. He framed the refusal as a betrayal not of the company, but of Moxley's own family and future reckless, foolish act of artistic vanity. The scene, described by an insider as a masterclass in psychological warfare, saw Vince using every verbal weapon in his arsenal to convince Moxley that he was making the worst mistake of his professional life. He reminded him of the global reach, the legendary status, and the security only the WWE machine could guarantee. Where will you go? What will you do? You're trading millions for obscurity. This was the final push, the attempt to plant a seed of doubt so deep it would rot Moxley's resolve. Moxley's response, however, was the ultimate act of professional defiance. He didn't engage in the argument. He simply pushed the physical contract, the multi-million-dollar deal, back across the massive mahogany desk. He never raised his voice and he didn't mince his words. He reportedly told Vince McMahon that he was done being a product and that he needed to be a wrestler again. He acknowledged the risks, accepted the potential failure, but stated firmly that he would rather fail on his own terms than succeed on someone else's. The moment of the final refusal wasn't a shouting match. It was a quiet, definitive severance. Vince McMahon reportedly sat back in his chair, staring at the contract and then at the resolute figure of Moxley. The expression on the chairman's face, according to the source, was not anger. It was a chilling mix of shock, respect, and utter bewilderment. He had never truly encountered a wrestler who placed creative integrity above the security of the final, massive contract. The meeting ended abruptly, no handshake, no pleasantries. Moxley simply stood up, nodded curtly, and walked out, leaving the unsigned, career-defining document sitting alone on the desk. That document, the final contract, became the physical symbol of the ideological clash between the corporate WWE machine and the raw spirit of independent professional wrestling. Dean Ambrose walked out of that office and, in that same moment, Jon Moxley was truly reborn. The world wouldn't know the full details for months, but the most important contract negotiation in years had just ended with a decisive, quiet defeat for the chairman. Walking away from the chairman's office was only the first step. The next was the uncomfortable exit from the backstage area, the maze of hallways, producers, and fellow performers who now knew, or at least suspected, the monumental decision he had just made. The company, while aware of the finality of the contract refusal, insisted that Moxley complete his scheduled commitments, including the farewell tour with the Shield. This created an atmosphere of excruciating tension. For the final few weeks, Dean Ambrose was essentially a ghost walking through the halls. He was professional, courteous, but entirely detached. The writers were instructed to treat him carefully, minimizing interaction and avoiding any storylines that would require long-term creative planning. The performers who were genuinely close to him, particularly Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins, understood and respected his decision, but the looming split cast a deep shadow over their final reunion. Their final matches were less about the script and more about three genuine friends trying to savor their last moments together, the biggest stage. The secret backstage fear was not that Moxley would jump ship, but that he would speak out. Vince McMahon and the company understood that if Moxley aired the creative frustrations he shared in that private meeting, it could potentially spark an internal creative rebellion among other disgruntled talent. The final goodbye was thus meticulously managed. His last appearance was kept simple, focusing on the friendship rather than the departure, a calculated move to sanitize the exit. However, the power of Moxley's refusal reverberated far beyond the WWE walls. His deliberate choice, fame, and fortune for creative freedom sent a powerful message to the entire wrestling landscape. It legitimized the idea that there was a vibrant, artistically fulfilling career to be had outside the confines of the established monopoly. It became the rallying cry for disillusioned talent everywhere. You can say no. His quiet walk out of that office became louder than any championship victory. It was a victory for the independent spirit of professional wrestling over the corporate machine. The stage was set for the formation of a rival promotion, built in part on the creative dissatisfaction he represented. The story of Dean Ambrose and the final contract is not simply a footnote in WWE history. It is a foundational myth for the new era of professional wrestling. By saying nitrogen monoxide to the most powerful man in the business and walking away from the staggering millions, Jon Moxley achieved something far more valuable than a lifetime contract. He achieved immediate, undeniable credibility. The decision was vindicated almost immediately. His debut at a rival promotion was one of the most talked about moments of the year, a moment of raw, unbridled energy that instantly showcased the creative freedom he had sacrificed everything for. The Jon Moxley persona, unfiltered, violent, and completely in control of his destiny, was the man Dean Ambrose could never truly be under the WWE banner. The stark contrast between the two characters was the ultimate proof that he made the right choice. The secret legacy of this confrontation is that it fundamentally changed how Vince McMahon and WWE viewed talent retention. The departure of a top star over creative differences, not money, was an embarrassing institutional failure. It forced the company to reevaluate their entire creative process, leading to a long-term shift toward giving more autonomy to top-tier talent, fearful that another star might follow Moxley's defiant path. The pressure was real, and the source was a crumpled, unsigned contract sitting alone on the chairman's desk. The final image of this story is not in a wrestling ring, but in that stark, quiet office. Jon Moxley, having stripped away the layers of character and compromise, stood on the precipice of a new life, having chosen uncertainty and struggle over the golden handcuffs. His courage forced the hand of an entire industry, challenging the very notion that a performer must surrender their artistic soul for professional security. Dean Ambrose didn't take the final contract because Jon Moxley understood that some things are worth more than the biggest check. His defiance became the battle cry for every wrestler who yearned to be an artist before they were an asset. This secret confrontation was the most important contract negotiation that was never signed, and its seismic effects continue to shape professional wrestling to this very day.